Today on CityCast Nashville, we want you to stay healthy this holiday season. But since we're not doctors, we've called in a professional. Dr. Keegan Smith is an allergist at Heritage Medical Associates right here in Nashville. Actually, he's my allergist. And he also sees our Hey Nashville newsletter editor, Margaret Kingsbury. Since he does a decent job of keeping the two of us alive, we thought he might have some tips to share with all of you. From how to handle crowded airports and relatives with multiple cats, to which homeopathic remedies actually work when you're sick, Dr. Smith has the helpful advice you crave, along with some great gift ideas for the allergy sufferer in your life. It's Monday, December 16th. Alongside Margaret Kingsbury, I'm your executive producer, Whitney Pastorek, and this is what Nashville's talking about. All right, Dr. Smith, here's the situation. You go home for Christmas. Your mother has 7 cats, and your sister's baby is coated in snot. What do you do?
You'd be surprised how common this situation is, especially around the holidays. And another scenario is kids who grow up in a house with cats or dogs sometimes, mostly cats, and they go off to college and then they've been away from the animal for months. They come home for Thanksgiving or Christmas and all of a sudden they can't be in the same room with the animal. I've seen that once a kid had to stay in a hotel room for the holidays, which is, not ideal for sure. But yeah, it frequently happens visiting family members. And so 2 different problems here. One of them is the infection thing. The snotty-nosed kid. Kids are like little petri dishes. We love them, but they share their germs.
I can attest to this.
Margaret's like, you're singing my song.
And so for the allergy, that one you have to prep ahead of time. So if you're going to a family member who's the crazy cat lady or whatever, then you got to be planning ahead of time. Antihistamines are great. There's kind of 2 parts to an allergic reaction. The first one is the one most people are familiar with. I call them sneezers. You walk in a room and they have sneeze a dozen times and then the eyes start to get red and itchy and swollen and the nose gets all runny. And, that's what most people are used to. Antihistamines are great at targeting that. My favorite personal antihistamine is Zyrtec. I think it's really potent. You can get the generic at lots of stores, big box stores. You can get like 400 pills for $15. And it tends to be quite safe as a medicine. You can actually take extra ones. So starting Zyrtec ahead of time is a great idea. And then nasal sprays are very good. I like Flonase Sensimist personally. I think that one doesn't have the funny smell or taste.
That's the blue one, right?
That's the teal and white one. It's a mist, so most of it doesn't run down your throat like the water gun version. Now, if you have asthma, that's a different situation. Cat asthma is infamous. There's these dark age tales of kids being around a cat and the cat sucking the air out of the kid's chest. You may have seen a Stephen King version of this. Well, That's because they thought cats were evil, but it turns out the kid just had asthma and is allergic to the cat.
Cats may also be evil.
It's
just
possible.
That.
It's possible. So their allergen is actually most concentrated in their tears and their saliva. A lot of people think it's the fur, but they transfer it to their fur, of course, when they're grooming or when they rub their eyes. And then it aerosolizes from there. And the protein that we're allergic to in cats is actually very small. It's about 7 microns in size, which is the perfect size to get deep into our airways. So that's where you use your inhalers. You make sure your medicine's on board and hope for the best.
This is so interesting because my mom has cats and I have asthma. As you know, I have asthma and I didn't realize that it could be so much worse.
Yeah,
asthma.
It's tough.
Chasma? Can we call it chasma?
Chasma. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
If your family member is a team player, sometimes they can get a HEPA filter. HEPA filters that are little plug-in units, make great Christmas present. About $100 at home supply stores. And you plug one of those in and it pulls the cat allergen as well as other allergens out of the air. And that can make a big difference. If you're going to be staying in a room where the cats kind of have free range, it'd be great if your family member or friend can run a HEPA filter in that room for about a week before you get there.
That's great advice. We have them in our house and my parents' house too to help out with that. I'm going to ask specifically about my kid because I know your wife is also a pediatrician. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. Yes. The better Dr. Smith.
Yeah. Wise. That's a wise thing to say. So my child is bringing home a different respiratory virus, I would say on average twice a month. It has been just a lot. Is there a way to keep it from spreading to everyone in the house?
You know, it's tough. There's certainly the tried and proven things like hand washing and do your best not to touch your face. Of course, when it's our kids, we want to love on them. We want to kiss them. And that's just part of life. You're going to catch things. Kids go through this cycle for their immune system where as they grow, they start to encounter all these viruses. This is why kids who go to daycare early in life get so sickly and all the ear infections and all of those things. And then by the time they're ready for kindergarten, they're ready to go. They're doing great. Immune system strong. Kids who are not exposed to that early in life, maybe they have a nanny or stay-at-home parent, they get it when they go to kindergarten. So you're going to get it sooner or later. And I think that once their immune system matures, they've seen enough of those infections, usually those infections drop off a lot. But parents are susceptible for sure. You know, we have vaccines for some of them. If you're an older folk, like a grandparent over 60 with asthma, there's actually an RSV vaccine now that's very helpful.
Ooh.
That can reduce the risk in those folks. It's not indicated if you're under that age. But hand washing and trying not to touch your face as much as possible, that's about the gist of it for avoiding viruses.
That's great to know, but it's not enough because currently I'm threatening to wrap Margaret in saran wrap so that she is able to come in and write our newsletter because she's so good, but her child keeps sneezing on her.
She will literally cough in my face.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
Of
like,
course.
"And
Yeah.
She's cute. She's cute.
She is cute.
Yes, they're so sweet and you have to love on them. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the next nightmare scenario for the holidays. You're traveling. Everybody, if they're traveling, is going to be around a lot of people, unless you're one of those lucky people who can just hermetically seal yourself in a car and go. But let's say you're not one of those lucky people. You've got to go to the airport and there's thousands of people. It's packed. There's nowhere to sit. Everyone's coughing up a storm. What do you do?
I can tell you what I do in airports. I am very careful about what I touch. And maybe I'm a germaphobe because of this, but when I walk into the airport, I just assume every single thing is covered in viruses. And so anytime I touch something, I try to make sure, okay, I'm washing my hands before I eat anything, or certainly before I touch my face. And I'm just going to be careful as I go through. Same thing for airplanes. You know, I'm not a person who carries sterile wipes and wipes down the seat, that sort of thing. But I try to be cognizant about the seats and things that I touch on an airplane. When you're in line going through security, you're just going to be around people and people are going to cough and you hope they cough into their elbow, but they often don't.
They don't.
And so, yeah, what are you going to do? You know, it is now socially acceptable to wear masks since the pandemic. Before that, you would have looked a little awkward. But now I think people are okay with that. So you can certainly do that. I personally don't wear a mask when I travel anymore since, you know, the virus is a little more contained now. But that's certainly something you can do if you're a susceptible person. If you have an immune deficiency or you have other respiratory conditions, that's a good way to try to avoid viral infections.
And do those same sort of guidelines apply for shopping malls, church, all the other places where we gather as a community this time of year?
For sure. I don't know if you guys ever listened to Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, Revisionist History, and some of his writings. His newest book has an interesting chapter about super spreaders. Some people, some individuals, just by the way they speak and by the way that their mucus happens to bridge across their vocal cords, can project more viral particles and more respiratory droplets than others. And you know, if you're around one of those people, I'm not sure what you can do. I think it's just going to happen. But it's an interesting concept. And I think you do your best to try to stay away from large crowds, but inevitably we're social beings and we want to be around people. So sometimes you just have to take that chance.
All right, admit it. It's time to replace your not-so-trusty old boots. You know the best place to shop for quality handcrafted men's and women's boots is at your local Tecova store, at the Mall at Green Hills, or on Broadway by the Ryman. That's right, you now have 2 locations to choose from, so stop by and grab a cold one as you peruse. Tecova's Nashville is at your service. It's always a challenge to find boots that fit well and can survive a night walking around town, but you can find your perfectly fitted dream boots with the help of Tecova's expert staff. Your new Western boots can elevate a casual look or add a refined flair to any outfit. Everyone will be asking where you got your sick boots, but I won't be asking because I know they must be Tecovas. That's TECOVAS.com. Don't go gently, y'all.
What illnesses are you seeing the most this year?
So my wife is kind of the canary in the coal mine for this as a pediatrician. And the week before Thanksgiving, I think she saw at least 3 or 4 cases of flu. So that's already started. And anytime flu starts before a holiday, it tends to spread more, right? Because everybody travels to their family members and spreads it around. I personally have not seen flu yet. Respiratory viruses are circulating. There's all sorts of those, rhinovirus, metapneumovirus. It almost doesn't matter, which one you have. They're all treated basically the same way. This summer, you may have seen we had this outbreak of walking pneumonia that's caused by something called mycoplasma, and it's like the biggest outbreak I've ever seen. And that is still going a little bit. It's tapered off a lot, started in a lot of kids and spread to a lot of adults. That's one that could trigger a lot of asthma.
You treated that for me.
Yeah, well,
Yep,
I can either confirm or deny that.
Yeah,
HIPAA, Margaret, HIPAA. Don't HIPAA
yes.
violate yourself.
Well,
My
I
God.
don't care. I'll say it.
But yeah, there's a lot of that going around this summer and this fall for sure, but it seems to be tapering off now.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, we went through 2 rounds of the walking pneumonia this summer and this fall. And then we also had rhinovirus recently. So we experienced both of those. And I'll add with the walking pneumonia, I initially got one antibiotic that actually didn't affect it at all. So that's something to keep in mind too with some of these viruses.
Yeah. That particular bacteria requires a kind of a specific antibiotic that's sometimes it's thrown around as a Z-Pak. Sometimes that's thrown around unnecessarily, but in that particular situation, it's the one to use. It's the one that works the best.
Is there any way for people to advocate for themselves in clinical situations? I mean, how would someone know if they had been given the right or wrong antibiotic?
I think, making sure you have a good primary care doctor is important. Someone you trust, someone you establish a relationship with, and someone who communicates well. And then I think you just be honest with your physician. You tell them how long you've had symptoms. Generally speaking, doctors, if you've had a cold for 4 or 5 days, most of the time we're going to assume it's a viral infection, and we're going to treat that symptomatically. We're going to say, use some Afrin nose spray for a few days, use some saline rinse, take some Tylenol or Motrin, stay hydrated, and you recover. If those kind of symptoms go longer than 10 days or so, then that sometimes indicates you have a sinus infection, which is bacterial, and those are the ones we often will treat with antibiotics if necessary. I think you just be honest with your doctor and their staff. You tell them your symptoms, you tell them what's going on, and usually people will respond.
All right, let's say that people are medicine averse or for whatever reason they're not able to access a doctor. What about some of these home remedies, homeopathic remedies? What about vitamins, essential oils, things like Airborne or Coldies? Does that stuff work?
Some of it, there's not a lot of data for most of it. There is data that honey, good old-fashioned honey, is effective as a cough suppressant, almost as effective, as a matter of fact, as Robitussin and some of the other prescription or non-prescription medicated cough suppressants. So good old-fashioned honey is pretty good. For most viral infections, they're going to get better on their own anyway, and so you can surf through. There's actually a nasal spray that I like to use that is a mixture. I don't know if you know when you eat hot, spicy foods, it kind of opens up your sinuses, right? Well, that's because capsaicin is a decongestant. It's a natural decongestant. There's a nasal spray with a funny name called Sinus Plumber on Amazon. It has a mixture of capsaicin, horseradish, and wintergreen in just the right amounts. Yeah, it sounds awful, right? But it actually does not fry your nose. It burns a little bit, but it gets you that sense of eating hot, spicy food without burning your mouth and your throat. That's a good decongestant. It's natural. You could use it as often as you want. You don't get hooked on it like you would Afrin. And it doesn't affect your blood pressure like decongestants like Sudafed would.
I'm just shooting sriracha straight up there.
Yeah, that would probably work too. I wouldn't recommend it though.
Do things like chicken soup help, like eating hot soups and things?
I mean, it makes you feel good, right?
Yeah.
And so you're treating symptoms. And if you feel bad, certainly you need energy. If you have a fever, you certainly need to hydrate. So sure, chicken soup feels good. And if that makes you feel good, I think that's great.
Is it true that people get sicker in the winter? And why is that, if that's the case?
Yeah, there's more respiratory viruses that circulate in the winter. And that's a well-established pattern that we had an interesting thing happen during the pandemic, during the lockdown. So RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, is an infamous wintertime illness in children and adults. And typically that is a virus that starts around December and peaks in January or February and then kind of fades away in March. And you almost never see it in the summer. Well, that got turned topsy-turvy during the pandemic. The lockdowns prevented much RSV spread. And then when we opened back up, all of a sudden we were seeing lots of RSV peaking in the summer. And that just goes to show you that viruses follow our patterns and we have exposure, and that's how it happens. Flu tends to circulate in cooler months. So flu circulates in the southern hemisphere during our summer. And that's usually how we try to predict what to put in the vaccine based on what's circulating down there. And then it comes up north, when our winter arrives and circulates here, and it's just a cycle.
Let's talk about what you think would be some lovely gifts for people who either suffer from allergies or have little petri dish children running around their home or generally feel like they get sick more than the average person. What are some great gift ideas?
So I mentioned the HEPA filter earlier. Those are affordable. As long as it says HEPA, H-E-P-A, then it will function well to remove an allergen. Some of them are louder than others. Don't get the ones that say HEPA-like or HEPA-type because those are not true HEPA. But if you get a true HEPA filter, that's going to help you with a lot of allergens in the home. Aside from that, the little portable hand gel stuff, I used to get this for my wife when our kids were very young because they were very sickly and she had the diaper bag or carried them in her purse. And, I'd go to Bed Bath & Beyond and get the little fragrance ones that smell really good. Those are great stocking stuffers for folks. As far as allergy, if you really want to dive in, you could get dust mite covers for people's bedding.
Ooh, yeah, those are clutch.
Yeah, the nicer ones feel like cotton. The cheaper ones feel like plastic. Nobody wants to sleep on plastic. So spend a little bit extra and get the cottony version, and those will do a good job.
Yeah. I also think a humidifier makes a huge difference for me. I have a big one downstairs that I run 24/7, and then I have a little one that I keep by my bed that I just turn on while I'm asleep, and that makes a huge difference in my quality of life.
Sure. Cool mist humidifiers are great. The air gets very dry in the winter when the temperature drops so much like it is right now. Our heat runs. If you have gas heat, that takes a lot of moisture out of the air. So cool mist humidifiers are great for the nose.
What about for kids? Margaret, is there anything that you think Marion would like?
If they made air purifiers that looked like cats, that would be great. It looked like a cat.
The irony there is great, isn't it?
Yeah.
So actually, I think that would be very marketable.
Yes, we would 100% buy that.
No one steal Margaret's idea. You're all under a non-disclosure, non-compete.
I will say the tissues with lotion. She will only use the tissues with lotion. So if somebody gave me a box of tissues with lotion in it, the little hand sanitizers.
You would feel loved?
Yeah, I would actually be, I would be charmed. I would be like, you know me. You know me really well. I appreciate that. I like the Nail Med nasal spray, the nasal gels.
Nasal gel is very good. When you have a very dry nose in the winter, there's a spray version and a squeeze tip version. But yeah, those are popular.
All right, Margaret, I think you've got one last question for Dr. Smith, and then we'll let him get back to saving lives.
Yes, I've had a couple questions from followers about this. So if you can't afford to go to the doctor or you don't have health insurance, what advice do you give? Is there any local clinics that can work with you?
There are many great resources around Nashville. Shalom Clinic is a very popular one for this, for care for people who can't afford other doctors, have no insurance. Vandy used to have the Shade Tree Clinic. I'm not sure if they still do. I used to go down there some.
The Shade Tree Clinic is open. I double checked and it is
great.
open and functional. Yeah.
And then Faith Family Medical Clinic is another one. Some hospitals have indigent care and other clinics that folks can go through. So I think there's sources. And most doctors, if you have a doctor with established relationship and let's say you lose your insurance or something, most of the doctors I know would work with you and, see you and give you samples of medicine if we have them. We try to get samples from the pharmaceutical companies. At least in my clinic, we have a lot of asthma inhalers that we try to keep for that. So there should be a way to find care for sure.
Well, Dr. Smith, we can't thank you enough. I know I personally have benefited from the stock of inhalers that you keep. Your office has also given me coupons so that I could afford things that I need in the past. Generally, I can't thank you and really everybody at Heritage Medical Associates enough for keeping me and apparently Margaret alive
Yes.
for another year.
And you're going to see my daughter later this month
Awesome.
for the first
Great.
time. You're going to get a new patient.
That's the fun thing about being an allergist. It's often we see lots of family. I have 4 generations in one family that I see, and that's exciting, a lot of fun.
Well, y'all are awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. You guys have a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
Thanks, you too.
You too.
That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. Please don't shoot sriracha up your nose. But if you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend? Rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter, where Margaret always keeps the allergy sufferers in mind. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Y'all take care of each other and yourselves.